Nice one. Welcome, everybody. I have a tendency to try and avoid using this microphone because I don't really like it in my face. Can people hear me if I'm using a voice of projection about this amount, and then I can put this away, and hopefully that will be enough for everyone, and then somewhere along the track we'll have some soundtrack going over the top as well. My name's Dave Atkins. I've been at the college for some time now, pushing people off cliffs and taking them on various adventures. I do tend to like it. It's definitely the favoured part of my job, and it's why I got into education. Luckily here in the Territory, now that we're getting into the meaty programs of Year 9 and Year 10 and Year 11, they're the main reasons why I'm here. Long journey-based, prolonged experiences away from mum and dad and in the natural environment. It's good for everyone, I believe. So I would like to just acknowledge the traditional owners, the Aranda people, and pay respects to elders past, present and emerging for living, working and teaching on this country. As I said before, we're here for Year 9s. Hopefully we're all in the right place at the right time. Tonight, it'd be great if everyone has a little bit of a snapshot, and some people will already have had experiences. I've already had people that have obviously been on Year 9 Endeavour before, so hopefully there are some extra bells and whistles to maybe tweak it a little bit if you did go on there as a student. I can remember some scenarios where I've talked to parents about dragging camp ovens out of torrents of water at Birthday Gap as their roast chicken was submerged in a flash flood and things like that. So it is exciting. We will hopefully go through the entire program and get a little bit of an idea as to what to expect. I'll stop talking here for a moment and then I'll start talking over there so you can have a little break from my voice and it'll change to my voice in another form. We'll have a look at the aims and objectives of why we're going out there and why we dedicate 2 weeks of college time to it. What might happen out there? I might be prone to just adding in some small anecdotes and other things that may or may not have happened and may or may not have caused serious bodily injury to students or staff. We'll talk about the food. It's very important for people to know what they're going to get to eat. Clothing and equipment, which we're getting better and better at each year as we become more and more prepared. Student responsibilities, so that hopefully you'll be able to go home, and if your son or daughter isn't here, you'll be able to get them to sit through and have a little bit of a look at this presentation later if the recording comes out the other end. Going over medical information, and I can acknowledge that I think about 80% of you have already signed away your child without being informed fully during this session, which is amazing and obviously good faith in the system, but you'll be more informed now, and hopefully the rest who have not given consent yet will be feeling better about the experience. And you'll be able to do that. There'll be a short period of time at the end for questions, and also there's a little bit of escapism for adults as well, an adult adventure that might be a small advertisement. So where does it fit? Hopefully our college program is so big it's very hard to get it on a slide, but for most of us we've been out, or our sons and daughters have been out on 3 days and 3 nights in Year 7. We would have gone out for 5 days and 4 nights in Year 8, which was sort of was out in the West Max, and a bit more of the journey-based program where we're not in the same spot each night. So we've sort of slowly building up to our 9 days, 8 nights in Year 9. And so it's only twice as many nights as it was in Year 8. So it's not too bad really when you look at it that way. Most people came out the other end of Year 8 fairly successfully, and I don't think too many people were capsized or had near misses in Ellery Big Hole, which was a relief. After this adventure in Year 9, you get to go on and think about Mittagundee in Year 10, and this year I think we have approximately 88 students going down to Mittagundee, which is no mean feat when you start booking 104 airfares by the time you include staff and a couple of extras for just in cases, to get the logistics of getting all those people down to Mittagundee, which doesn't end at the airport obviously. There are 2 whole days of travel in that Mittagundee program for Year 9, and hopefully some snow will be seen, eaten and shared. Year 11 Aspire is the largest of our journey-based programs, 10 days in the West Max. It does include a 48-hour solo, a significant abseil whilst wearing skin-tight, figure-hugging wetsuits with life jackets, helmets, possibly beanies, gloves, depending on the temperature, maybe a rain jacket, multiple pairs of socks, and possibly stuffing a muesli bar somewhere practical that you can access while you're being submerged in and out of freezing cold bodies of water, progressively getting slower until you get to the coldest place on Earth, where the wind sort of sweeps along and creates a fetch-like feature where snow has fallen, white fluffy stuff. All right, do not lie. In Year 11, you may also have the opportunity to accelerate your learning and jump into a Year 12 Stage 2 outdoor education course. And that's obviously with approval from the Director of Curriculum, who's sitting over there. So hopefully he'll be super interested and your sons and daughters will be psyched to possibly be pushed off a cliff or sleep on a cliff at Mount Arapiles, maybe be exposed to some abseils that are of 100 metres in length, or some significant multi-pitch climbs, those sorts of things, a self-reliant journey along the Larapinta Trail as well. So that is an opportunity for Year 11 students as we get further along. The last thing that happens, and it's fallen off the page, is a 3-day advancement to Ross River generally, where Year 12s go, and the whole cohort goes to the same place, which is a little bit like my worst personal nightmare, a whole year level in the same spot. But the focus isn't necessarily about that outdoor living and travel. It is not a journey-based program. There are showers, there is catering. It gets a little bit more comfortable because the focus is about channeling in, focusing towards gaining a successful NTCE, ATAR score, and pulling our fingers out so that we can actually finish off Year 12 and then get ready to be out in the real world. Obviously, there are more opportunities at the college. If you are not ready to leave after Year 12, you could probably come back as a gappy. So, I'll stop talking here, hopefully. Magically this will start and cooperate and you'll get a bit of a visual for what's going on out there on Endeavour.
Control edge, no one really told me when I started camp because they're just long individuals. They just have to get this camp for another. If you think about it, camp and that's that one my students actually full of actions and it doesn't usually how much pain, how much fear. I want to know how you get through it. If you're proud of someone.
Every day try more light. Challenges of the world, those who are living in activity. Well, yes, it takes more time and further I to pursue things that I don't think I would be able to.
Once we get into Endeavour, there's a lot more focus on the students to participate in the particular ability. Because the students manage that themselves too, people not put in place. And they sort of strongly encourage their peers to go out and go. Students have to take on those responsibilities and realise what it is that they're actually.
That was pretty steep. Lots of people struggle like that. But there's going to be times when you have pain in your life. So just that little bit to get up that. And I reckon that view like was like $1 million.
realise I wanted to step up together and what we made smash it, everything, use hard work, much on that reach, or it's not stop. It's a long way, so I think I push the long way. Traveling through the gorge and the days and villages and amazing memories. Students also sometimes upside down the abseil, which is sort of an added challenge as they go down and my favourite part of the camp would probably be abseil and just the big part of the camp, living in islands and swimming through the gorge. That was all, but it was really fun and my favorite part of the sport is really love swimming, and also because of my everyday living, swimming like with the baby. I saw lots of people sitting inside of individuals and saying like, how much we actually change for baby. Oh, man, you really sort of use it makes you just have amazing stars, beautiful red rocks, gorgeous, small and laugh, but we don't allow wanting buying hot chocolate, getting ourselves through the top chocolates, growing the carrot, and shifting down the ones to better people and the worse.
We were very fortunate to have a fairly talented filmer in the infancy back in 2014, Nick Cavelli, who's gone on and done a bunch of films for other colleges and things like that. And he used to have to work as an outdoor editor and do filming on the side, but now he's sort of focused more on filming. So he goes out on adventures. So if you have a big adventure that you need to go on and you would like some documentation, maybe he's your man. So obviously 2014, maybe a bit's changed, maybe a little bit hasn't changed. But one thing that probably has changed is that people that have kids at college now probably remember going up Spinifex Hill. And they might not be aware of the sort of intricacies, but we have had some changes around logistics and that sort of stuff in the last decade, funnily enough, to streamline it so that it's a little bit more effective on an organisational point of view. So at one point, when I took over, I think we had no short of 37 possible different food combinations to go into tubs, which was quite complex. For instance, so now if we have 6 groups, we just pack 6 tubs and they all look exactly the same. So our food drops have simplified. We just have more of the same drops, those sorts of things, which ensures that we don't miss out on things like pine nuts for the Spinifex pesto and that sort of stuff. So people did go up over Spinifex and have a little bit of a high experience there. They used to go in and out of Fringely Gorge, so they did get to go through the gorge twice, but in that manoeuvre, there was like a very intricate game of chess going on where one group came in and they went into a western arm and another group came in and they went into an eastern arm. Meanwhile, another group came straight through the centre and went all the way up to the north and then came back into the western arm after one group went back into the eastern arm, and then they all swapped around and another group came in and they all hid so they didn't run into each other. So we've tried to streamline little things like that. And we did have to chop the high ropes course out of the trees because it was sort of deemed a little bit unfit for human use. So now we have a much more dangerous low ropes course with a greater chance of hitting your head on the ground, but at least we won't be tied to a tree that falls over in the process. So it is very exciting. There are a few more tweaks, obviously, and they're probably not as grim as some of that. So this is where our adventure really begins. So on year 8, I guess we sort of got dropped off. We went for a little stroll. We weren't carrying everything with us. We only really needed one pair of pants, one pair of shorts. Underwear would have been at your discretion. The boys probably only took one pair. The girls probably took a couple more. The boys probably should have taken a few more pairs, and they've realised that now, so they'll be making sure for this program, because it is still at your discretion on the list, I think. Students are on camp for 9 days and 8 nights. So that first day, we get here at the college, we meet down at the roundabout or the outdoor ed shed, and we all go, and there's a massive explosion of everyone's bags. Everything's sort of checked, and we're like, oh, look, I don't fit into my sleeping bag that was issued in year 7, but now I'm a small giant towering outside of the sleeping bag. So those sorts of things, hopefully, we can sort of rectify before we go out, and make sure that everyone's got some equipment. So sometimes on that first day, there might be like, oh, Mum, can you please bring a toothbrush? Like, I'm probably not going to share those sorts of things while we're out there. So make sure that you have a look at that list, and we'll talk more about equipment later. Small groups, about 16 to 18, so that's fairly exciting. And the Year 9 students that were interested were very effective at choosing buddies. They had the opportunity to choose buddies a couple of weeks ago now, so I hope that everyone's buddy is still a buddy with them come July, because it's a fair way away at this moment. But make sure that you've got a buddy out there. So I think about 50% of Year 9 students probably took that offer, and others were just, let's take it as it comes, and I'll just go with who I go with. Small groups, and they are independent. So once that bus drops everyone off, or once we get on the bus, the groups are effectively separated from that point forth. And we have 2 groups per day, so we have 4 groups going out, and those 2 groups, one group usually is about 1.5 to 2 kilometres in front of the other group. So it's a fair hike if you're thinking about going and chatting to the group in front of you to go out, find them, and then get back. Probably not recommended. Variety of activities, and you would have noticed a few as we went through the video there before. But each day you actually camp in a different spot. And there's a couple of groups that might get to camp in the same spot, but it'll be 6 days apart. So once on the way through and coming out towards Fringe Lily and up over the Razorback and then down through Birthday Gap, you might camp in the same spot. But there's not a lot of overlaps for the camps. Or for the locations. So every group will have our outdoor ed professional. So we've got some people coming back who have been ex-students. We've got some people that have worked with our young people down at Mittagundy. We've got a fella that was working on the Larapinta Trail for the whole of last year, who was very jealous of some of the staff that were working here last year. And so the outdoor ed sessional staff members carry all the qualifications and the experience to manage groups in the outdoors. And then our college staff go out as well. So on staff in the college, we've got, I think it's 12 or 13 staff members that are qualified with wilderness first aid. So they've gone and done a higher level of first aid training. They're also serial offenders for going on camp. So they've been on camp multiple times. For somebody like Luke Mashford, for instance, I think he's been on Endeavour 15 times. So he'll get it right one day. Safety is the main responsibility of the outdoor ed sessional staff member, and it should be a major focus for the individual as well, as we work on respecting ourselves while we're out there, taking on the responsibility to be sure that we're safe and operating within what we can understand. So students from day one will ultimately be broken down into these little chef groups, which it's a very handy acronym for cooking, hygiene, environment, and fire. Funnily enough, all the boys often gravitate, and the pyromaniacs, to fire on the first day, and they're very keen to burn things, set fire to things, and make large worship style fires to special offerings and all of those sorts of things. It can be a little impractical to cook on, however, if you are making a large fire signal to let people somewhere up on the moon or space station or something like that. If you're trying to talk to Elon Musk in a satellite, we'll probably keep it down to a minimum. And the idea is that the fire is for cooking, and it does add the ambience of having a cohesive group and gathering spot, which is really good. One of the trade-offs to cooking on the fire, however, is that one of our most frequent injuries is burns as a result of people burning themselves from doing silly things at the fire, or possibly somebody takes a pot off the fire and then puts it over here nowhere near the fire, and somebody else comes to help with said pot without any pot grabbing devices or too far away from the kitchen and grabs a hot pot. So the staff will obviously be thinking about that, but students should be treating every pot as hot because there's a good chance that they've been on the fire at some stage until otherwise proven. You will see every now and then we do some vertical rescue training and subject students to be upside down. They do usually survive, and sometimes they're seen doing push-ups, star jumps, you name it. It all happens on there. Anybody that feels that they really need to be dizzy, go red in the face, spike a dizzy, nearly vomit, all of those sorts of things, we have an offering in there for you. If you are just terrified about going off the abseil at this point and getting this close to a large edge is enough for you, coming to the top might be enough, and we'll try and use some gentle persuasion as you are sort of coaxed off, fingernail scratching, those sorts of things. But ideally, there won't be any physical pushing. Strongly encouraged, come and have a look. You'll sit up the top, watch a few people go down, decide if the ropes are still going to hold you, and then maybe some people don't end up going down. So the abseil is definitely one of those areas where we have a challenge by choice. Some people may not have abseiled on year 7. However, if you do miss the abseil on year 9, it makes the abseil on year 11 very, very challenging, because not only are you just abseiling with a harness and helmet on, you've sort of gone through this massive boulder field. It's been fairly awkward to get through. You've been passing packs, but you and your pack need to get down the abseil on year 11. So if you're sort of a little bit on the fence with the abseil, year 9's a good place to have a little practice, if nothing else. And then imagine how your pack might come down. So you will be exposed to horrible gorges and scenery, and this is sort of the favoured Fringe Lily Gorge. You can see that that stretch of water is fairly shaded. It does get fairly cool. There's a fairly large obstacle. I've lost my mouse, but there is a very large obstacle at the end in the sort of freezing cold area. It's about 70 metres in length, and students are expected to tie a raft together. So you can see a couple of large blue drums there in the foreground, and they are expected to sort of float successfully their backpacks on said drums. Every now and then the raft may fall apart based on how effectively students have tied it together. If they have failed to follow the waterproofing instructions, the bag might go from something that weighs about 15 kilos to weighing about 115 kilos. Have got to the end of that water and backpacks have been floating, students have been riding them through, and then tried to get a backpack out of the water, and it was so heavy that the straps just snapped off into my hands before. So ideally your waterproofing will be brilliant, because although it is very easy to dry stuff out in the desert, a sleeping bag is not going to be your friend at drying out that effectively if you're getting in there in the afternoon for a bit more of a hike. So the group leaders are assisted by a staff member from the college. So there's a bunch of people's favourite teachers lining up, ready to go and build their relationships with you. That's the relationship between a teacher and a student, so they no longer have to deal with making you try and do English or maths or history. They can just instead be exposed to you 24/7 for 9 days. The relationship will get stronger. Always a female adult will be in the group. Sometimes there's 2. I'm centrally located and basically sit in the middle with a whole bunch of food, a whole bunch of equipment, couple of vehicles to put supplies out, go to the low ropes course, go to the abseil, spend a fair bit of time holding onto ropes, putting helmets on, coaxing people over the edge, coaxing them up to the top, sort of helping at the low ropes course and those sorts of things with logistics. We do have a bit of a communication system in place so that we can communicate with our group leaders, and they do communicate daily with the base camp as well. So they have a couple of forms of communication. Happy to unpack that and break that down if anybody needs to know more detail about communications. Food was pretty important though. I saw some people getting a little bit excited about it. Now, every time I see my roast chicken from a couple of years ago, I do get pretty excited. I cannot guarantee that your roast chickens as students will look this crispy, to be honest. I blame partially the sacrificial onions and your ability to rotate the coals effectively. So, broccoli may not be included. So we have a very complex food system. We have some spaghetti bolognese, spinifex pesto, which may or may not contain spinifex, a vegetable curry. There's a couple of dehydrated meals which happen in home ec. So home ec dehydrates something like 500 to 700 serves of food per year to feed people on camps. It's quite an extraordinary undertaking, and then it's re-eaten by students. And it does provide a lot of sustenance, but it also reduces the weight. We're not carrying cans, and it reduces that preparation and cooking time as well, which is a bit of a bonus, particularly if we've had a longer day, like we've walked all the way from Fringe Lily up over the Razorback, down through Spencer Gorge, into Birthday Gap, and we're sort of getting in at 9 or 10 o'clock if we didn't get up early enough. So there are some action consequences to sleeping in, obviously. There is a different meal each night. There's often a Mexican chili with rice, tomato pasta. We do have some ruse tails. And on that night, there is a cultural cooking session, and it is quite graphic, and students do start with a raw ruse tail, full hair on, scrape the ruse tail down and do a full preparation. We do end up with a lot of people taking a vegetarian tone to that meal. There are quite a few veggies on the side, so there are always some suitable options there as well. It does get fairly primal. It is quite difficult to break up a ruse tail if you've ever tried to before, but hopefully in Year 9 we'll be able to get through that one. I think we do have some pizzas one night as well, and then there is a roast chicken night as well, which is obviously one of the favoured and savoured towards the end. It is very much a reward post Razorback. So many things happening out there. If people have dietary requirements and stuff like that, hopefully it's already in Operoo because you've been on some programs before, but you'll find out more information as we go. A detailed menu could be sent out if you needed to just have a look and see if there are some foods that are suitable for your son or daughter. Oh, coming up for air, the equipment list. Everybody loves a good equipment list, and we've been working on it for decades, to be honest here, and we're never going to get it 100% right, but we like to think it's pretty good. So it is comprehensive. There are thousands and thousands of people now that have been on Endeavour. They've been on Year 11. They've been on Mittagundy. We have the greatest percentage of Mittagundy bumper stickers in any sort of state or territory, I think. If you surveyed all of Alice Springs vehicles, there's a disproportionate number of Mittagundy bumper stickers on the vehicles in this town. As for hoodies, there's also a disproportionate number of Mittagundy hoodies floating around. So we are getting around, and there's a large population that have already been on camps, and they may have grown, so the size of their stuff might need to change. So there's a vast array of availability for clothing and equipment. Woolen jumpers are awesome if mum or granny or somebody has knitted some spectacular ones with polka dots, all those sort of ski jumpers from the 80s, big turtlenecks, you name it. Woolen jumpers are going to be awesome. They're also quite handy if it's a semi-sacrificial woolen jumper to be able to pull it over your hand and use it as a pot grabber every now and then when the pot grabbers are lost. I won't encourage that, and speak to your young people if your woolen jumpers are of sentimental value before they undertake those arrangements. I have seen staff members using them to keep the rice warm while they finish cooking their meal as well. That can end up in a fairly charcoaled state. Fleece jumpers are also fairly useful and a little bit less bulky potentially. They do insulate when they're wet, so making sure they're of the appropriate materials. Thermal underwear, very exciting. Everybody loves wearing thermals. I particularly like Where's Wally rainbow stripes. The little ones with the ants on them are very popular, it seems, and there's a whole variety of purple leggings and all sorts of things that come out. People do seem to think they're very much a fashion accessory, preferably if you are a young person, you're not just wearing your thermals the whole time. I would strongly encourage turning up on the first day without your thermals on, because once you start walking with thermals on underneath your heavier workwear type pants or hiking pants, things get very sticky and smelly and generally a little bit gross. If you can save your thermals for a few days or use them as a bedtime thermal or cold in the mornings, those sorts of things, it's good to sort of circulate them around. Parents will probably know if their son or daughter gets a little bit on the nose, and you might consider a second pair of thermals or some woolen ones. Just for your own sake, you might even pack a spare snap-lock bag or two to make sure that said stinky thermals end up in a snap-lock sealed bag, maybe marked as biohazardous waste for when you get back in the car and you're going past McDonald's or Hungry Jack's on the way home. Yes, fashion is not that important. You can try to look dorky. There is not a lot of difference between male and female thermal attire, so no one will know except you whether or not you're wearing boys or girls thermals. Every now and then some of them do sort of stretch and hang down a fair bit. It's important that they do fit though, and the elastic hasn't gone in them, because there's nothing worse than walking along having a fair bit of plumber's action as you're walking in your thermals or going through the gorge. You may be exposed to horrible scenes throughout the night. Anyway, we love a good campsite. I'm not sure where everyone is in this one, but it looks like a very nice quiet night for the staff member. We do need to make sure that we have some fairly sturdy footwear, and it's not to necessarily say that everybody goes out and gets a pair of hiking boots or borrows mum or dad's leather scarpers from 200 years ago and puts those on for the first time the day they turn up, because that does usually end up fairly detrimentally. If you are purchasing new footwear and it is more of a hiking orientation, please make sure that it has been worn before we come on camp. You could also perhaps enlist your young people to go out and maybe do some sort of heavy labouring and just walk slightly loaded, like with a few bags of cement, maybe carrying around some other items that actually push their feet right into that footwear and really help manipulate the foot into that shoe so that it's worn in a little bit. I'll let you be creative about how you think that might work, but please don't just get like, oh look, I've got a pair of hiking boots, they're roughly the same size, they're only half a size smaller, because every year we probably have 2 or 3 students turn up in that scenario and they end up wearing their wet shoes as their primary shoes, which may have a toe hanging out somewhere or something like that, because they can't physically wear their lace-up Blundstones or some sort of large work boot with steel caps or something that has laces on it. So make sure the footwear is comfortable. It will make life a lot more enjoyable. Typically some sort of tough pair of sneakers, it could be an excuse. I personally like wearing Solomons. It doesn't work for everybody out there though. Dirt does go through this type of shoe. If you have Gore-Tex lined ones, they can be less dirty feet at the end of the day. However, a shoe like this doesn't provide support to ankles. If you already wear ankle braces to play netball, I would strongly suggest not turning up with a pair of low cut below the ankle shoes, because it could be detrimental when you start sort of walking around fully loaded with a backpack on. So it might be good to have a little bit of a practice beforehand. A few other notes there. Blunny's not suitable. A second pair of sneakers that are functional, so not sort of Crocs, do not count as a second pair of runners or sort of cross-trainery type things. Minimal toiletries. There are no PowerPoints out there. We can't plug anything in. We do have a long pants policy once we're definitely getting into year 9 and students are expected to wear long pants. We did have a few snake sightings last year while we were out with year 9s. There was a very friendly snake at one campsite that sort of hovered between the campfire and the food preparation area. It may have ended up inside one of the food tubs for the evening, and then it was released shortly after the group had left the next morning, but it's probably still there. Minimal toiletries, like sort of hard yakka, don't sort of bring pants that are sort of crazy heavy because they will be hot, but you are pushing through a bit of scrub here and there too. So it's probably better if they do have a little bit of robustness about them. So we try to avoid jeans, because often jeans end up with the sort of sweaty between the legs, and then that sort of prolongs over a bunch of days of grubby, grimy, possibly not taking our thermals off, more heat and sweat and mank sort of building up, and then we end up with this chafing, and nobody talks about the chafing until we get to the point where it's red raw and we can actually see tissue coming through the skin, because no one wants to get first aid in that region. So making sure that we are being sensible and respecting ourselves. It's very important that if you do start to notice these things, that maybe you change your undies or change your pants, those sorts of things. There are a few spares available on camp if it's not working out, but it is not exhaustive. Other items covered on the list. You might be walking in the darkness. Lone Dingo are pretty good. They'll give all students a discount in there, and they have a little bit of excess stuff in there. Obviously, that's probably not in there just yet, but you might start to think about whether or not that's an option. Hopefully, if you know that your son or daughter has stopped growing, or you think maybe they're on eyeball height with the tallest person in your household, maybe that's time to think about an investment that might cover Mittagundee and Year 11 as well at this point. We are currently trying to get a fleece that has a school logo on it. It's taking a little while, but it will happen in the future, which would be suitable for going on camp with as well. Beg, borrow, steal items from other people that are going on camp. They might have been on Year 11, so they're already pre-dirtied and sweated and stuff like that. You'd probably wait until they go through the wash, but Year 9 and Year 11 students can sometimes find somebody that's about the same size. The op shops are pretty good, although Mittagundee's got the jump on you guys, so you might have to get in there soon if you want to get like some long sleeve cotton shirts or something like that. Rain jackets are provided, and other specialist equipment is provided by the college. There's a few things of what not to bring. They're pretty much anythings, sharp knives, a horrible attitude, that like camp sucks attitude. If like camp sucks, it's going to suck, it will suck. If you come with that positive attitude, it's going to be a lot better. Knives of any sort, really. You can probably get away, if you're being a real weight weenie, with just using a spoon or some sort of a spork. However, if that spoon or spork is of plastic nature and it snaps, then that can make life a little bit tricky if you don't have a spoon and a fork, but really probably don't even need knives or even butter knives in our kits. There's a couple of other things in there, deodorants as well, same as at school effectively. So if you don't have it at school, you probably ideally won't have it on camp. Goodness. So as a student, if it sucks, and you say it sucks, it will suck. It will always suck. If you go in there with an open mind and just think, I'm going to have the best opportunity, I'm going to give it my best, I'm going to step up into this program and just have a go. All that the staff will be asking for is you just do your best. And that will be different for everybody. Some people will be able to ace the abseil and they'll be upside down doing push-ups. Some people will be really good at reflecting on the day and looking at what people have done well throughout the day, maybe offering some constructive feedback. Some people will just love getting into the kitchen and try and help in there every day. Some people just addicted to digging the toilet hole for some reason. That will be their thing. Might be starting the fire. Maybe nobody else can use a flint and a steel because the matches have got wet and you're literally there using up your 2,000 strikes and maybe haven't got a fire for dinner. So take it the enthusiasm and try the best that you can. Have a willingness to try new things. If you haven't done a low ropes course, what better opportunity than when there's a low ropes course there set up? So have a little go at that. Respect yourself, and that means looking after yourself. If we can't look after ourselves properly, We will have trouble looking after the environment. We'll have trouble looking after our friends. We'll have trouble being respectful for staff and equipment and all of those sorts of things. So you are essentially, as a student, the most important thing on camp. So it's important for you to make sure that you don't get sunburnt on the first day. If you get hot spots from walking on the first day, maybe talk about them or address them so that you don't have these things that look like 20-cent pieces on your heels for the next 8 days. And sort of we need to potentially look at cutting your foot off as an option. So respecting ourselves, others and the environment, being responsible for your own safety. I have been on a Year 9 program where a Year 9 student was collecting firewood and they decided to actually go into a tree to get said firewood, and the way they got into the tree was there was a tree about here and there was a tree about here, so they decided to go up the tree until they could get to a branch that was suitable to break by literally body jamming and climbing up the tree until they were about 3 meters off the ground and both trees were sort of peeling apart. And they couldn't see an issue with that over a whole bunch of moulder stakes of death. So as a student, there's sort of the examples. If you think, oh, am I respecting myself? Yeah, probably, because it's going to be really cool when I get that branch. Am I respecting other people? Oh, well, if I get staked by that mulga thing, then someone's going to have to maybe deal with that impaled object, and then I'm probably going to have to sit in the troopy while it's bouncing around inside my abdomen or something. And then, am I respecting the environment? Well, maybe we'll just work with the logs and the sticks that are on the ground that have come down the river in the last flood for our firewood collection as opposed to these significant trees. Very exciting. It is important to follow the college rules as per standard. Please don't go out and get a new piercing just before camp because you're away in the holidays and you thought it's the perfect time to get my belly button pierced. And this has happened before a number of times. We get our belly buttons pierced in the holidays and it's still just it's a little bit ripe, right? It's just a little bit red around the edges and then we don't tell anyone and we don't have any ability to clean it while we're out there. And then we put a backpack on and it's sort of then we're adding lots of sweat down here and we're adding lots of dirt and then we end up with this big red ring of sort of flesh eating it into itself and manky and stinky, and it'll be the stinkiest thing there and there's pus coming out and it's gross and then we have to take you out and take you to the hospital to get antibiotics and it's bleh. Please don't get any piercings before you come on camp, whether I can see them or not. Girls on camp. Obviously, there are a number of girls that have been on camp before. There are plenty of staff that come on camp that are females. There are plenty of females that have already been on camp. I guess, if there are concerns and questions, it will be addressed by a female staff member. This little plastic PVC tube is known affectionately as the rocket. And the rocket is what we use to dispose of sanitary items. So boys, you probably don't need to use the rocket on a regular basis. But it will be gone through for the whole group so everyone has an understanding of how to use it, and students who've been on Year 7 and Year 8 would have already been exposed to the rocket and what it looks like and what's in it. And then there's obviously some backup sanitary items, but anybody that is menstruating should be prepared that maybe it's going to happen while you're on camp, and just be a little bit prepared for it, because it was very awkward when I had to ask Mr. Chris Tudor, one of our former principals, to go and clean the shelf out at the supermarket of all the pads and tampons, and he found that quite confronting one year when everyone cycled at the same time on Year 11. Medical information. Excuse me, I'm just going to choke. Please make sure that you've updated it on Operoo. I think maybe you can't give permission until you have updated it, so it's always good to make sure you've done that. The 6th of May, just before camp, effectively, it's a long time before camp, but it gives us a good chance to be able to prepare. And obviously, you'll be able to edit that stuff right up until the day. But for us to be able to document and be prepared for any case scenario that may come up, it would be great if that information is entered sooner rather than later. The departure dates, you guys largely were awesome at giving any sort of notification about departure days. Some people even signed up for some shorter options, which might have been a preference for some people. It has been recorded. However, there is not a group that is entirely shortened in duration. So those people that have sort of contacted the college for shorter options, we would look at them coming out on approximately the morning of day 5, I think it is. But we'll communicate with those parents individually. If kids that are out there decide that, hey, it's actually not that bad, I can probably make this, like it's not as bad as I thought it was going to be, we'll keep them for sure, but it won't be an opportunity for anybody that hasn't sort of said, oh, I would really like to, yeah, I'm constrained by, I can only do these 5 or 6 days, and that'll be me. It's not sort of a free-for-all and the whole cohort to be able to just go, oh, actually, yep, no, I'm out, because the transport won't be available for you. Complete it all to the best of your ability and knowledge. Groups are out there, they're on Operoo. Everybody who got buddied and had buddy options would have only had the options for people that were on their day, so their day of departure. So hopefully people have got a good idea about when they're going. We also have this magical expedition where parents might be able to be involved in their own little adventure. Don't worry, you don't have to participate with your son or daughter. It is entirely adults only on this trip. But you'd be exposed to some of the things that the Year 9s get to do. So if that's something that interests you, obviously get in touch with the college. It's obviously a little bit condensed. There might be some walking that maybe is a little bit longer than what the Year 9s might do, but you would still be submerged in freezing cold water, get to go up and over the Razorback and probably have quite a good time and understand what is going on for your young people while they're out there. So let us know quickly if you might be interested in that. This weekend, for anybody that didn't know, it's like the college's biggest event of the year, the 3 Hours of Power. So you could effectively have a team in there if you would like. If you are a mountain biker or you have some sort of possibility, I can see people already scanning the QR code. It'll be a bit tricky because it's kind of cut off at the moment. But if you would like to ride in a 6-hour team for 6 hours, everyone's riding for 3. So it will only operate between 7 and 10 p.m. on Saturday night at the Telegraph Station. There'll be lots of people there. It'll be really fun. So get a team together and see what happens. You might choose to ride with your sons or daughters and experience a relatively sedate trail in total darkness. Questions? I think that's about it for me talking about Year 9. Does anyone have any questions or feel that maybe... Oh, well, we provide all the backpacks, so you don't need to, but yeah, it fits into that specialist equipment. If you have backpacks at home, like it would be, yeah, somewhere in the vicinity of 65 to 70 litres, I suppose, is what we sort of have at the college. So it's sort of got an adjustable hood on it. They're all